Hello, and welcome to the Let's Talk Transformation podcasts. Today, we will be discussing playfulness and its place in leadership and organizations. I am delighted to welcome Elrika Erasmus, psychologist and the founder of Coach Mind Consulting. Elrika, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Elrika, you're an experienced counseling psychologist, and you founded Coach Mind Consulting to help organizations and leaders with more fluency and creativity, but particularly in the field of play. And I know you're also a Lego Serious Play facilitator, but that you bring all the aspects of your training and experience today to put it at the service of organizations and to look into this subject of play and what it means. And you've also recently completed your doctorate, so congrats for that.
Thank you very much.
In playful coaching supervision. So let's start there. You're a specialist in playfulness, coaching psychology, and supervision. What does that mean, Elrika, and how did you get there?
Right. So it's been a bit of a journey. Um, and like many modern journeys, it started in the pandemic, uh,
Hmm.
where I've been a counseling psychologist and I got really, really busy working remotely, but also with my coaching clients as well as my normal clients
Mm.
that I was seeing for counseling. And I've always felt that there was this golden string tying everything in my life together, which is playfulness. Um, and so I did this doctorate in exploring this special space of playfulness in coaching psychology supervision. And coaching psychology is quite new. It's only
Yeah.
been established as a division with the British Psychological Society in 2015.
Okay.
So there was a huge gap for research in that area. And playfulness for adults is very under researched.
Yeah. I was just going to say they aren't two words I would put together.
Yeah,
Coaching psychology, supervision, and playfulness.
yeah. There was a big black gap there, which is brilliant for
So-
researchers. And so that's what I did. I interviewed 10 of the 35 supervisors in existence in the UK. Um, and I extracted some of their material and compared it to the literature that we do have about playfulness of adults, coaching psychology, supervision. And that was quite interesting and a really useful and rewarding experience.
Mm. And tell me a little bit more about play, because for me, playfulness is something that we do quite innately when we're younger. Although today I feel that younger generations are like that in front of the phone and they don't necessarily play, which I think is probably harmful for their brain, but you will give me your opinion. But it's also a little bit like creativity and playfulness. It's something you only do when you're young.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's formatted out of us in education. And therefore, when we get to an adult age in organizations, we are reformatted in inverted commas. So, can you tell us what playfulness is for the human brain and why it's so important for performance and thriving?
Yeah, absolutely. So play is really, really interesting in that it's actually been researched for much longer than people believe.
Mm.
So I'll just use, I've got a brain. And for the people who are just listening, this is plastic brain. I'm not really doing brain surgery. There was this scientist called Jaak Pansep, and he researched with rats, if you tickle them and they giggled, which part of the brain would light up. And he saw that there was this little part right there in the middle of our brain, very,
Wow.
very deep into the center, that actually lights up. So, from his research, which was done many years ago, this giggling rats research, Google it and you can listen to them because they giggle. If they giggle and they use bat sensors, they can actually hear it. It's very,
Wow. Even the idea of that sounds playful. Giggling rats.
I
Okay.
know, right?
Yeah.
Not that I like rats, but
No, no, me neither, but still, the giggling ones maybe.
yeah. And so we know that play actually is really seated within our brain chemistry.
Mhm.
And it's very important to sort of start there at the biology, that it's part of all of us.
Mm.
As you said, it's not nurtured for all of us, and definitely within the more sort of Victorian school systems, it was schooled out of us.
Yeah.
And that was very useful if you then went into the factory or the military. You needed to not to be creative with your weapons.
Mm.
You needed to be able to follow instructions.
Yeah.
But of course, in this new world, in this sort of very agile new workplace that we live, we need to also be thinking about the whole human and not just that one sort of way of being.
Mm.
So currently, I think it's really important for us to embrace our roots of being playful and to be open to play and playfulness.
Mm.
And
And go on.
so, oh, sorry, there's sort of really interesting definitions of play as well. So um, Lehman and Wheeler and Lehman wrote a book about playfulness and coaching psychology, and or in coaching, and they define play as the playful onion, which I quite like, which is this idea that play is on the outer layers, the stuff we can see.
Oh, nice.
And then playfulness is sort of more inner layer, what we can't see, the sort of more intentions of being playful. And right at the heart, at the center of the onion, is the playful center, which is where we find compassion and warmth and imagination. And if we start from there, then we can allow playfulness and eventually play to come into our workplaces.
So interesting though, isn't it? Because it's essentially, if we look into the multiplicity of the parts of self,
Yeah.
everybody has a playful part is what I'm hearing. And whether it's exiled or not, or apparent or not, is a different discussion. Which is really interesting because what happens, Elrika, and what attracted you to Lego serious play? Because I'm now making an assumption as I'm speaking to you that that's what Lego serious play is doing. It's going to get the inner playful part that everybody has somewhere and enticing it, cajoling it, if you like, to come out and play with the rest of the group. Is that what's happening? And what got you interested in Lego serious play?
So Lego serious play is quite interesting because it is a bit of a bridge between the factory worker and the very agile worker. In that it's a very rigid structure, actually, a format which the facilitator will follow with given questions and timings and given instructions to allow this playfulness to emerge. And the reason that it evolved in the first place was it came from the Lego company when they tried to make their own meetings more productive and find ways to be more agile in their thinking. It started in 1995. It was coined first in 2002. And lots of research from across the world has gone into it. So it's a very well-researched method. But what it does essentially is it provides this very safe structure for people to play in a very level playing field. So the way it works is there's 4 questions or 4 steps. The first is the question is asked by the facilitator, that's previously agreed on. Secondly, everybody builds the answer. Thirdly, and they build it quietly. Thirdly, everybody gets a chance with a certain amount of time to explain what they built as their answer. And then we learn from each other's models. And there is a time to reflect on it, to think how we can change it, to challenge it. And so everybody, the introverts and the extroverts, speakers and the people who would rather think about things, get the same chance to play along in meetings.
That's so interesting because I'm hearing 3 things: creating a safe space, catering for all different types of profiles, learning, ways of being as well as ways of doing, and also collective intelligence in terms of honing your own ideas whilst listening to others. Why does that work? What is it about? Because it's a relatively simple process. So, what happens when people step into that space? And what happens if they can't, Elrika? How do you get them in to come and play with Lego? Which, if I take a sort of executive lens who spends his day talking to stakeholders and talking strategy, why would he or she pick up a brick of Lego and do that? And I'm sure that's probably a question you get quite a lot.
Yes. Well, I think Lego's done us a great favor by landing really big clients like NASA and Samsung and Amazon, F1, all of them have bought into the process, which is brilliant. But what we see is through the sort of different steps of using the Lego, we increase skills building, because not everybody's very skilled with building Lego, but we also increase challenge. And so you get people into that space where they've got enough skills to build a challenging question, and you get into flow. So the other thing that it does is it doesn't assume that leaders have the answers, because we ask the answers of everybody in the room. And that's why these meetings go so much quicker.
Yeah.
We get to results much, much quicker because we don't have meetings about meetings.
Yes. Yeah.
And the last thing that's really important to think about is on a neurological level, if I think about the brain, if I think about my plastic brain, if I just think and talk, I'm literally only using this frontal lobe bit of myself. And so I'm working with a small part of my brain. But when I start to involve my hands, and I start to involve 3D things, I'm using a much bigger part of my brain. And that helps me to think more divergently. So also on a neurological level, we are seeing this sort of hand-brain connection. It really helps people come to a point where they can relax enough to listen to other people, but also create their own answers.
And is that because you're stimulating at the same time all the different parts of the brain? I hear that a lot about music. I play the cello, so I hear quite a lot about what music does for the brain, and that you have to use all different, and bilingualism, that you have to use all different parts of the brain. So, and playfulness is the same, I'm hearing. So what does that open neurologically so that we can have such a quick process? Because it's basically the bottom line business case for inclusion, isn't it? In terms of listening to all the diverse parts of a system and then coming together as a whole.
Yeah. So there's quite a few processes happening at the same time. The first one is just pure serotonin. We see Lego, it reminds us of children or laughter or playing, and so immediately we feel a bit happier, we feel a bit playful. But then sort of secondary, when we build, we get that dopamine hit, because look what I've built. And people want to share, people want to say, look at my model, look what I've built. And then you get that dopamine hit, I've completed a task. So that's really addictive. But the third thing that's really, really interesting, and this is play with Lego and other sorts of play as well, is we rise the adrenaline. So there is this time factor, it's urgent, we have to do this, and we learn to tolerate this sense of adrenaline. Will I finish in time? Will mine be good enough? Because it's in a safe environment. I've built this thing, it was really important, and I can break it again, and that's fine. And Lego will break.
Yeah.
One of the sort of sureties we have, right?
Yeah.
Put your brick too hard and the whole thing collapses. And it's failing in a safe environment, which then helps us to learn to fail together, fail again. And if you do this in team, the team will be very forgiving, and people will go, because they have a shared experience of failing. And so you build that team cohesiveness as well.
And if I look at so you mentioned COVID, of course, post-COVID, the amount of mental health, I don't know if the amount has increased or if we've opened the dialogue more, but we talk more and we see more discussions, questions, care around mental health, which is a good thing. And if I look at the amount of burnout in organizations, it's still steadily rising. Do you think that this idea around playfulness and what it represents in the workplace can help to address the stress and burnout challenges we see in organizations?
100%. And the reason I say that with so much conviction is, if I can laugh with you, I can cry with you.
Yes.
That's something that I've seen so many times in the counseling room, in the coaching room. If I can experience one emotion with you safely, I will feel more safe to experience another one. And so with playfulness, this is one of the things that's so interesting that came from my research, was playfulness creates safety, but you need to feel safe to play. So there's a sort of reciprocal circle going round. And if we approach playfulness with respect if we ask people to step just outside of their comfort zone, if we give them the boundaries, how this is going to play out, where it will end, then we give people that safe space to come in and really explore, experiment, engage, and have the ability to retract again and to say, I don't play anymore. This is enough. I've played up to this point. So it will really help people to show up more of themselves in the workplace. And I think the other thing is it also allows for things like whimsy and people to bring their personalities to work a little bit, which I think really helps us to be less afraid of who we are, of being found out, of having imposter syndrome. If I can show up to work and everybody knows that I'm an enthusiastic collector of aeroplane models, that's fine if people accept me for who I am, because they also have their whimsies.
And what do you think is the most important thing, therefore, to consider when you are going to use play or playfulness with adults, particularly leaders in organizations where there's quite a defined structure and therefore their identities are linked to often to the level of the organization or to their title?
Yeah.
What's your experience there, and how do you get them to take a step towards you in terms of playfulness?
So I think it's really good to explain to leaders and to understanding ourselves that there's different levels of play. So not everybody will be playful, even though we've all been born with a playful sort of circuit in our brain. Not everybody is on the same level of playfulness. I was quite surprised in my research to discover that I am actually really very playful, and things I took for granted is not the norm.
Is that because you didn't consider yourself as playful, or you just considered yourself as the norm?
Probably a little bit of both. I just thought everybody thinks this is normal or uses as many metaphors or how to joke. I wasn't quite sure, but now I know I'm definitely on the more extreme playful side, which is surprising because I think many people will view me as serious and get to interact with me. And playfulness is not silliness. There's a difference between being silly and being playful.
So, do you make that distinction for people when you talk about playfulness? Because just thinking about what you're saying, I often see reticence because I don't want to look silly, or what will other people think of me, and of course that's heightened by the time we get to adult age by socialized norms and everything else.
Yeah. Oh, and I've been in a training where people were asked to dance. I'm like, this is work. I'm not dancing. So I'm definitely not open to anything that's playful. But there's an acronym that the researcher Proyer uses for describing playfulness, and he says it's other-directed, light-hearted, intellectual, and whimsical. So the acronym is OLIVE. And when you take those 4 things into account, you think about agile leadership, for instance, it really relates very well. Agile leadership takes into account other directedness. We want to be there for other people. It takes into account lightheartedness. We're not holding anything too tightly. We let things go. We hold ideas lightly. That's part of being agile. Intellectual, we're super invested as agile leaders in learning more, in constant evolving and learning. And whimsy has to do with how we listen to our customers, how we're able to sort of co-create with customers and don't think any idea is too silly.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it, the link to agile, because agile, Lego is often used in agile, and it's a translation of the Agile Manifesto, the mindset and culture that you need to do agile. And one of my questions was going to be, how can we adapt what you're learning about play and playfulness to leadership and building sort of more inclusive cultures? And I often hear we use Lego, oh, you're doing agile. So it's already been put into a binary box, a Cartesian box of agile equals Lego, end of story. So it's really interesting, Elrika, to see your take on how we can decorrelate Lego from agile, although it is, as you say, a brilliant example of what agile is trying to put in terms of philosophy and ways of working. But what else can we do with Lego to play, and not necessarily a whole day workshop, because we don't all have a whole day to put in a workshop, but I'm still convinced that we can play
Yes.
with or without Lego. But let's take the with Lego scenario for the moment.
Yeah.
How can we integrate it as sort of busy leaders into our lives, into our work lives with our teams?
Yeah. So I think the important thing is to remember, a box of Lego isn't playful.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
It's a bit like that ping pong table, the customary ping pong table because we care about well-being.
Yeah. 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 Beanbags.
But if you think about it, I've got my Lego with me. If you think about Lego, what it really is, it's metaphors.
Mhm.
And these are quite acceptable metaphors because we know what they sound like, we know what they feel like. So even in terms of neurodiversity, a lot of people are quite comfortable with
Yeah.
with Lego as a tool. So if you have if you want to include playfulness and you just have a box of Lego, you might want people to pick out 5 pieces of Lego and build how their day is going.
Okay.
So you really want to keep it simple because it's not about the toy, it is
No.
about the story.
Mm.
The toy
Mm.
is just a vehicle for the story. The Lego Serious Play really is just a vehicle for whatever you use it for, whether it is agile or any other sort of development.
Mm. And it's interesting, isn't it, that you can use it quite simply because I think the other thing we get stuck on is I don't have time to do
Mm.
playfulness.
Mm.
We don't have time for playfulness in my team. We're serious and we need to get things delivered, that type of thing.
Playfulness will get in the way of
Yes,
serious.
yes, absolutely. And depending on national culture, not being serious at work means that you're not credible or that you're not involved in what you do and things like that. So I'm interested, my next question is around the intercultural aspect of what you do, Elrika, and whether you get different national culture reactions to your request for people to play. It doesn't have to be Lego, but your request for people to step into a more playful space. What are your insights there? Because if I'm working in a large multinational and I have between 5 and 20 nationalities in my teams, what should I be looking out for, or where should I have guardrails in terms of playfulness?
It's so cultural specific.
Yeah,
And in some cultures, it can be seen as an insult.
yeah,
So it's playfulness is a very delicate thing, as is any of these sort of power dynamics that
yes,
we get. And that's why I thought when I researched this relationship between supervisors and supervisees, that power dynamic is so delicate. And it's
yeah,
really the same in many different organizations. So when we look at national culture, a good thing to have is a conversation around what do people consider fun? What
okay,
do people consider work? What do people consider fun at work? So I would start with a conversation, a very simple conversation, and say it's really important for us to think about the whole human being today. And we're just going to spend 5 minutes doing this. Other ways of entry are things like mindfulness meditation or relaxation. So an imagination thing.
mm,
The moment you imagine things, you start to have creativity, you start to relax a little bit, and you get people more on the same page. Um, if you want people to, if you want to use big words like divergent instead of creative, or
mm,
divergent
mm,
actions instead of playfulness, sometimes that's a way in to not insult people. And be
mm,
really careful of the toys you use. So in some cultures, it might be more useful to have pen and paper games
right,
than to use Play-Doh or Lego.
mm,
So it
mm.
doesn't have to be children's toys necessarily.
Yeah, interesting. It just has to be different from what the expected way of getting to the outcome is that right?
Yeah, I think different and with an end in itself,
Yes,
which
yeah,
is so often missed. When we think of play, we think, oh, yes, for children, play is their work. Oh, really, it isn't. Play
mm,
is their play.
yes, yeah.
And the
And
same for adults, it's just something to do.
yeah, and the adult brain, I'm assuming, is no different from the child brain in what play stimulates. and what it
Which
enables. We've just dampened it. Is that correct?
that's correct, yes. It
Okay.
is. And I don't remember, I think it's Stuart Brown who said that the opposite of depression, of play, is depression. It's not work. So it's that idea that,
Wow.
we don't
Okay.
play, create, move out. We actually shrink and become really sort of downwards. So
Yeah.
play also allows us to look up and to notice things.
Yeah. So sort of being able to look down on the dance floor from the balcony type of thing in terms of
Exactly.
perspective. If
Yeah.
I look at the amount of pressure we pour into organizations, the amount of tension, the amount of deadlines, then one can quite easily get into that sort of place,
Yeah.
can't one? Especially if we don't necessarily feel we can speak up about how we're feeling.
Yeah. And I think
Um,
there's a big sort of cultural heritage of people used to blow off steam by
yeah,
going out drinking after work or having these sorts of events that was not always inclusive for women who
yeah,
often have to do childcare.
yeah,
And now with hybrid working, that's not always the case because we log off and we're at home and we still sit with a lot of those stresses.
yeah.
Or people want to get home because they've now learned it's quite fun to be at home and not in the bar. So I think it's really important to think, how else can my team blow off steam in the workplace that's inclusive,
Mm,
that can just lift the spirits and change the dynamics a little bit without doing an offsite or going
mm.
out after hours.
And that could be quite simply taking your meeting outside, maybe?
It
Yeah.
could be, yeah.
Okay.
You're meeting outside, bring a box of Jenga into the office
Yeah.
and have sprint building going on
Yeah.
lunchtime.
Mm,
Put a post-it note with a joke on the fridge,
mm,
that sort of thing. It can be really, really simple.
But it's basically about becoming light-hearted, isn't it? Putting
Yeah.
some space into the space, if you like, some air into the space.
Yes, and make it light.
Mm. Mm. What was your most surprising finding in your research, Elrika, about playfulness and what it means for organizations?
My most surprising find was that even though it's innate, what people often lack is the confidence to play, and the confidence tied in with the permission.
Yeah.
So people will have a desire to play. They might have a gossip with a friend, have a little joke here, but actually the confidence to be more playful, to be open, really depends on the leader and the atmosphere they're setting. So I thought that was really a shame that we don't allow or encourage playfulness that can be beneficial to all of us.
So it's as ever with these type of things, it's a leadership lever
Yeah,
in terms. So if I look up and see that happening and the permission is there, then I will allow myself to step more readily into
yeah,
that space.
absolutely. But if you
Mm.
have a leader who frowns at somebody who is naturally playful
Yeah.
and sort of, or somebody goes, oh, they must have attention deficit disorder because they always crack a joke or
Yeah.
that sort of thing, then you will definitely withhold your playfulness to comply.
Mm. Mm. Or I've also heard when you finish playing with the Lego, come and do some real work. I mean, but if the top leaders are saying that, then it's a hard sell, isn't it? Let's put it
Oh, it's a very hard sell.
that.
They absolutely have to buy into it. And if you are facilitating in a big company, then oftentimes I would suggest making the leader your play assistant to get them to buy
Oh,
into the
nice.
process a little bit.
Nice. And do you see different levels of resistance that are linked to levels of the organization, or is that just a bias on my part, an assumption on my part? Is it more resistance at the top, less resistance as you go down, or not?
There's definitely more resistance at the top,
Yeah.
especially if a meeting has more levels in it. If it's only, if C-suite meets with C-suite, then
Yes.
they'll happily play because they're playing with their mates.
Yes.
But when we have different levels in there, it's much harder for people to speak up. It's much
Mm.
harder for people to engage, and everybody is looking at the leader for the answer. So that makes it quite hard. And in that sense, something like Lego Serious Play is quite good because it
Yeah.
levels that playing field.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as everybody does that.
As long as everybody plays along, yes, and
Yeah.
plays loosely.
But actually, it's a great idea, isn't it, in terms of experiential inclusion?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is.
And as I say that, I'm thinking that that could be quite impactful and quite transformative. What's the most transformative thing, Elrika, that you have ever done with playfulness? It doesn't have to be in an organization. I know we're concentrating on organizations, but in general, outside of your research,
Mhm.
the application of playfulness, what's the most transformative thing you've done?
So I was co-lead on a charity for a while, and we needed to do some fundraising, but we also needed to get back the trust of the stakeholders and the buy-in of the community. And we were preparing for a Christmas event, which included wrapping 200 gifts. And normally this would sort of be outsourced, and the decoration would be outsourced. But I thought we could use this opportunity for community building, and we organized a wrap and chat
Oh, nice.
with tea and biscuits. And so many people turned up that we were finished in an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And we were sort of scrambling, what do we do now? And so we luckily had a few bottles of wine and some more snacks. And it turned into sort of a get to know each other event, which was really useful because all of those people then turned up to the main event and future events. And, it really did wonders for the charity's bank balance, but it also did wonders for community engagement, which then managed to sort of roll ahead for future events. And that was just a really great way to turn something that was a drab job into a really fun, engaging community event.
It's also testament to the power of coalitions or communities, isn't it? And I know that as we move into a different organizational model, I'm going to use the word ecosystem because external ecosystems are changing, but internal ecosystems are also changing. So if I look at the whole flatter model of organizations and teams of teams, if you like, working together, what does that mean for how much we need to apply playfulness in inverted commas? Because I'm defining playfulness as more light-hearted, different cognitive, different emotional practices. Do you think we're going to have to use more of it, less of it, or will that be an individual choice?
I'm always pro more of it.
Yeah.
Because I really believe in the power of play, and I think it really takes us back to our common humanity. So it doesn't matter on which team you are, where you are, if you share this experience of play, or if there's things that teams play similarly, that's already a touching point. That creates some empathy across this ecosystem. And I think one of the things that I really noticed with my students, so I was working as a psychologist for Cambridge University during the pandemic, and suddenly all of these students were attending lectures in their rooms, not seeing any other students, and not seeing this on their faces when the professor spoke, which they would normally see in the lecture room. They would normally look puzzled and see somebody else look puzzled too. But suddenly you don't have any of that feedback that I'm a normal human being. And I think when we play and we play together and we play in ecosystems, we get this feedback from other people that my feelings are normal, my experiences are normalized because of seeing other people going through the same things, struggling at the same time. It's really important for ecosystems to thrive in organizations by adding play and playfulness in there.
And if you have a 100% remote organization, what what happens with playfulness on a screen? I mean, I still feel that I can get quite playful on a screen, but that's me.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the sort of things that came out of my research as well, was all of these supervisors had to switch to on screen. Some was working hybrid, but most of them have abandoned toys as something they used before. And I'm actually a big fan of using toys on screen because I think it really helps us connect again. So With playfulness, we can both build Lego at the same time. You know,
Mm.
send you a bag of Lego and we can build it, and there's people who do that. We can decide to use some of the wonderful new on-screen tools
Yeah.
to really make AI work for us. It's our wonderful servant, so let it work for us.
Mm.
And then you can do, you know, for demonstration, like my
Yeah.
plastic
Like your
brain.
plastic brain.
My
Yeah.
plastic brain is a brilliant tool. That's
On my smiley face.
You've got a smiley face.
So
Fantastic.
I'm holding up a smiley face for those of you who are listening. Mm.
And so I think it's really, really important to embrace what we have now, which is this
Mm.
kind of working, and then use technology for the good of play.
Mm.
So I
Mm.
don't think it should be a barrier. I think it can be something that we can really use to our benefit and the benefit of our teams.
It's interesting, isn't it, to see how digital can enable human. That's how I see that, because machines don't play for the moment. I know we have video games,
They
which
don't
I'm
play for
very
me
bad
now.
at, and I don't really, I'm not an expert at all. But yeah, I think the whole digital transformation discussion is around how can it enable
Mhm.
human connection, if you like. So, and I mean, I think play is a big part of that. If you're willing to, but I mean, for me, you have a double screen there for play, a double resistance because you can see yourself. So when you're in a room, you can't see yourself. So, well, I'm talking for myself. I'm probably a little bit bolder than if I can see myself. It's like a mirror. It's just like, oh dear.
Yeah, and you can't see what other people are doing really. You can see sort of just
No.
half, but you
Yes.
can't see the whole person. So there will always be a place for in person.
Mm.
But
Mm.
when there isn't, you know, really sort of enhance your use of technology, but also think outside the box. So send a postcard,
Mm.
send stuff with snail mail. Make
Yeah.
sure your team gets a physical thing they can hold.
Mm.
So if your company is in a position to do those sorts of things, even though you work remotely, you can still have a tangible thing that
Yeah.
connects people. And I think that's quite important too. Don't forget about just sending stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And just trying to create belonging like that.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Time is running. I do have a last question though for you, Elrika. I'm sure we've got listeners thinking that sounds really cool. I'm not sure how I would bring that to my work environment or my leaders, or what would be your call to action, therefore, Elrika, for listeners wanting to get more involved in using the idea of play as a daily practice or as a lever for team dynamics?
Yeah. I think it's really important to gauge your own play level.
Yeah.
So if you are not naturally a very, very playful person, and I tell you something ridiculous, you just won't do it. So if you sort of think, on a scale from 0 to 10, I'm maybe a 3 out of 10 when 10 is super playful, then I would like you to push yourself to a 4 or a 5. This might be something like, and so this is what I urge everybody to do, no matter what your level is. And what I want you to do is I want you to seek out 5 minutes and put your timer on. Those 5 minutes is what Johan Huizenga, he was a researcher of play in 1938. He called it
Wow.
magic circle.
Okay.
And so you create your magic circle, and it's this magic circle because you can leave all worries outside of the circle. No money, no time, nothing. You've got the circle. And inside that 5 minutes, you are going to do something that elevates your play levels. So make you a little bit uncomfortable and maybe a little bit happy. So this might be for somebody who's not super playful. This might be putting on a song and dancing to it for the 5 minutes behind closed doors with closed curtains, if you know that's your level.
Mm.
Or it might be for 5 minutes, we're only going to talk about the things that we found fun today. So that might be around the dinner table. We might say, gotta put the timer on for 5 minutes. I want to hear fun things. What happened that was fun for everybody?
Okay.
And for a team at work, you might want to put the timer on and you say, right, we have got 5 minutes to build this tower from Jenga or from Lego. And so there is a beginning and an end, and it's contained. Or if you really want to up the ante with your team, you can put a question at the top of a page, draw a circle, and say, you've got 5 minutes to write the most ridiculous, silly, outrageous answers to this solutions to this problem. So if the problem is I want to engage less with AI, then you can say, I'm going to put my AI in a different language. And so I first have to learn the language before I can engage with AI. Or, you can really go out there, ridiculous answers, and push your brain to just think more and more outside the comfort zone. And that you have a small space of time in which you can have fun.
And that's brilliant, because 5 minutes at the beginning of a meeting is more than acceptable, isn't it?
I think it's more than acceptable. I think it's even necessary and allowed for the latecomers.
Yes, yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave our listeners with that magic circle and thinking outside the magic circle as to what they're going to put in it. Okay, super. Elrika, thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts and your experience and your research on playfulness. Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
The best place is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
You find me on LinkedIn, you'll see sort of how I evolve, things constantly change. There's a link to my website, and I'm very happy to continue this conversation with anybody who wants to.
Okay, excellent. And I will put the link in the show notes so that people can access it quickly.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and play today.
It's been an absolute pleasure playing. Thank you. Thank you for a great conversation.